Hello and good evening. My name is Crystal Lopera, and today we'll be talking about human trafficking. Human trafficking is defined by Shamsuddin as the recruitment, transportation, harboring, or the receipt of persons by means of threat or use of force and other forms of coercion for the purposes of exploitation. Today, we will dive into the basis of human trafficking itself, look at real world cases, and what can be done and what has been done to hopefully prevent this from happening in the future. There are a few different types of trafficking, most notably sex trafficking, forced labor, forced marriage, and organ trafficking. Sex trafficking is more common with women and young girls who have been forced into prostitution, but it can affect anyone. There are many ways that which they can be forced into this lifestyle, which such as the promise is a better job or life, being sold by family, or being kidnapped. Then there's also forced labor, which is common among young men and immigrants. They can be tricked into providing labor for free, usually with some sort of exploitation or violence. With forced marriage, women are usually sold or kidnapped under the guise of monetary gain and forced to marry. These people can be transferred across state and international lines, making it harder to track. Lastly, organ trafficking is where a victim is tricked or forced into removing their organs, usually unknowingly, to have them sold to the highest bidder. Because of the scarcity yet high need for organs, this market targets sales to those who are very desperate. The victims usually have no idea of what's really happening to them and cannot know the impacts of the surgery on their health. There are four different methods used by traffickers to help trick potential victims. Traffickers can and have used false recruitment agencies to trick potential migrants seeking work abroad. They can do this by convincing their families to send their children to work, thinking that they're going to get a new life in a new place. Force is the second one, usually physical harm, restraint, or sexual assault. They can even use confinement in a way that breaks individuals' resistance in the early stages. That will prevent them from thinking they can run away. They can also use fraud, which is the false promises of employment, wages, living conditions, or just false promises of a better life. They can be changes late stage to working conditions or the paid promise to victims. And lastly is coercion, which is threats to harm an individual or family, use of manipulation, confiscation of legal documents such as green cards, passports, or threatening to share information or pictures about others, about the individual with others. So let's look at some real world examples. The first one we have is Barbara Amaya's story. When she was a little girl, she was having a really troubled home life and she ran away multiple times. When she was 12 years old, she ran away and this woman offered her a place to stay and she introduced her to the trafficker. The trafficker and this woman groomed her for prostitution and she was working here. She was working for them with no pay. They would tell customers that she was younger than she really was at 12 years old. And eventually they sold her to Moses, a pimp in New York City who had very high sale quotas and would beat her if she disobeyed, or even if she didn't make the high goals for the day. She was arrested multiple times for prostitution, and Moses never bailed her out. He just left her there. Eventually, to help numb the pain, she got put on drugs by other girls. By the time she reached her mid 20s, she had finally escaped, but the criminal record from her time being trafficked had followed her around in adulthood. The next story we have is about Jason de Guzman. When his uncle received a job offer in the US, he offered it to Jason. The lady that had contacted them had told Jason that he would be receiving a P1 visa for athletes until they can get him a work visa in the US. They told him that this would be way easier than going straight for a work visa. Eventually, they ended up taking his passport and all of his important documents. The traffickers told him he owed 12 grand and that he had to work to pay it off for 10 years. They even told him that because they brought him into the US, they owned him. So there was nothing he could do about it. They put him to work at an elderly care facility where he met another victim slash coworker who was in the same situation. Eventually, after 9 months, a concerned neighbor realized that they never saw either of them get a break and sent a tip to the FBI. Finally, after those 9 months of work, the FBI helped him escape the traffickers and arrested the traffickers. There are a number of government and non government programs to help trafficking victims and crack down on human trafficking in the U.S. For example, the National Action Plan to Combat Human Trafficking is a government funded program which main goals are prevention, the protection of victims, prosecution of traffickers, and partnerships with different organizations to enhance the effectiveness of its anti trafficking efforts. There is also the Safe House Project, which is a non government funded program that is trained to help identify trafficking victims and also provide support for victims, including housing, escape opportunities, and emergency services. So we have these programs, but what else can we need? So obviously, you can never lack on more support for the victims after getting out of trafficking with more shelters, job assistance, and just helping them transition back to a normal life outside of their trafficked. You can also use specialized mental health initiatives to help assist these victims with their trauma and help them move past it the best they can. Human trafficking is still a serious issue to this day, and it's important to know what signs to look out for. By keeping an eye on your surroundings, you could save the life of someone who needs it. Thank you for tuning into this presentation today, and I hope to have taught you something about the seriousness of human trafficking. Have a good day, and thank you.